Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our series of tutorial on current affairs. And we continue talking about the trade war. The European Economic Community in 1982 introduced trade restrictions against Argentina during the Falkland controversy. Ghana also boycotted Portuguese goods. In all such cases, countries have tried to justify their actions using this exception. Another case was the introduction by the Swedish government of the global quotas on imports of certain types of footwear. Swedish government tried to justify by reasoning that as a result of the relatively high production cost of the Swedish shoe industry, combined with Sweden's traditional liberal trade policy, the volume of shoe imports had increased substantially, resulting in decreased production, which it argued had become a critical threat to the emergency planning of the Sweden's economic defense as an integral part of its security policy. It was thus constrained to resort to the temporary emergency measures under the diplomatic pressure and strong disapproval from the international community. Sweden was constrained to hold consultation and eventually withdrew the global quotas within a period of 2 years. One of the interesting cases on this issue was between the United States and Nicaragua, where the American president issued an executive order in 1985 prohibiting all trade with Nicaragua and transactions relating to air and sea transportation between Nicaragua and the United States. Nicaragua challenged this action before GATT panel, but the panel's terms of reference stipulated that the panel could not examine or judge the validity of the motivation for the innovation of Article 21 by the United States. Thus, the panel did not consider the question of whether the terms of Article 21 precluded it from examining the validity of the United States invocation of that article, as this examination was precluded by its mandate. The panel thus concluded that it was not authorized to examine the justification for the United States invocation of general exception to the obligation under the General Agreement. It could find the United States neither to be complying with its obligation under the General Agreement nor to the failing to carry out its obligations. The text of Article 21 clearly suggests that WTO panel may not have necessary jurisdiction to decide Article 21 cases as Article 21 differs from another exception to the GATT. The primary reason is that this exception appears to allow a member state to itself define the scope of this exception. The text of the exception states that GATT does not prevent a WTO member from taking any action which it considers necessary for the protection of its essential security interest. Thus, the self defining nature of the national security exception and its subjective reading suggests that WTO may not have the requisite jurisdiction to determine the legality of the measure. The ambiguity of the national security exception cannot be allowed to frustrate the working of the WTO with proper diplomatic pressure. Misuse of the national security exception can be prevented to a large extent, but one must not be oblivious to the fact that each country must be the judge in the last resort on questions relating to its own security. And it continues. Since it was between USA and Nicaragua, of course, being a tiny country compared to superpower of USA, and could not make their case even heard at the panel. And when it was about Sweden, Sweden was in fact convinced to lift the ban over there. So things work differently for different nations.